Good morning, everybody. DDO 44 coming at you with another video. All right, so I had an appointment today at noon, not knowing that the draft was going to actually be at 1. So I did get a chance to see the first round, but of course today is the second round since the NBA wanted to spread it out into 2 days for the first time ever. So, you know, when I scheduled this thing, I'm like, all right, I know the draft is the second day of the draft. So if I schedule my appointment at 12, then of course I'll be able to see the draft, because of course they're going to schedule it the same time the first round was, right? Yesterday the round 1 came on at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. So I knew that it would start at 5 p.m. today. Wrong. Because it's the second round, I guess they figured it wouldn't be good to put it in prime time, so they have it in the middle of the daytime, and it's like, yo, it's a weekday, fam. Like, what are y'all thinking? If y'all want anybody to watch this thing at all, why the hell would you put it on at freaking lunchtime Pacific time and rush hour Eastern time on a damn Thursday? It just defeats the purpose. If you're trying to maximize the possibility of people watching it, don't put it on at a time where people aren't going to be home to watch it. So for me, I'm going to be on the way home for the first half of the second round. And for somebody who covers the draft, that's like the worst possible thing. And here I am thinking I was doing well in regards to scheduling this thing. So it is what it is, man. I'll try to pay attention to as much of the draft as I can en route, since my appointment's for an hour. But that's what's going on there. So yeah, man, I'm just on my way there, and wanted to talk to you guys about a little of what I saw last night a little further. I did react to the draft initially last night, and gave him as best I could what I had in mind, but you know, there's a few other thoughts I'd imagine that'll come about. You know, I'm not mad at Minnesota for getting Rob Dillingham, for getting Terrence Shannon Jr. and adding them to their situation. I think the most important thing for Minnesota, in my opinion, was to try to maximize all assets, since they've mortgaged so many picks for Rudy Gobert and likely won't be able to trade him for half of that when it's time to. So what you want to do is take everything you do have and get the most out of it, while simultaneously putting enough young talent around McDaniels and Edwards that'll make them want to stick around and make it so that their tenure there won't suck, or that they're in the part of some potential rebuild going forward after Rudy gets a little old and is not really that guy. So I think they did a great job of giving him a future running mate that he can have on his squad for years in Rob Dillingham. And of course, McDaniel's on tap for multiple years. So that trio right there looks amazing, regardless of what happens with that front court. If they want to keep Karl Towns, if they want to move on from him and trade him for picks someday, or for young players someday, they have made their asset class significantly more valuable in theory for bringing Rob Dillingham to their situation. Now, maybe you wonder, if they would have just waited a year, maybe could they got an even better prospect for what it is they paid for Rob Dillingham? I don't know. But I think Rob Dillingham's a damn good dynamic player to bring to your situation. And one of the things that Dillingham doesn't do well is defend. And you had one of the best defenses in the league, so it's not like you were in need of defense. I think a guy like Mike Conley's getting a bit older. They've been trying to toy around with the backup point guard position. They didn't really have anybody that could do that. They also didn't have a microwave scorer off the bench, for which Dillingham can fill in all of those roles. If you need him to be your starting point guard 2-3 years from now, he's good enough to probably do that. If you need him to play a microwave role right now off the bench, scoring the ball, he can do that right now. And you just love the idea that Mike Conley can still start. You know, so if for some reason Dillingham isn't that guy yet, you don't have to rush him into being a productive starter right now for a win-now team. And if Mike Conley has his issues, he can step in and play point guard then. And so it's just a lot of different things that I think they checked off by bringing in Rob Dillingham. Not to mention that because their timeline is right now, but could also afford to have guys that they wait on based on the circumstances of having a very young Anthony Edwards. I think it's a sweet medium for Rob Dillingham, who I expect is a good tweener in regards to those two circumstances. Both a guy who can develop and a guy who can contribute. So I think when you bring those players to you sooner, the less time into Anthony Edwards' timeline you eat up trying to let a guy like Dillingham develop. Let's say you wait till next year, like I just said, and maybe try to find a different guard that might be a little better than Dillingham in a better draft. Now you're waiting more years to try to wait for that player to develop, as opposed to getting him this year and starting that development process. So it kind of aligns so much better. And it makes the Minnesota Timberwolves, a already contending basketball team, a better basketball team, in my opinion. Because you're adding more talent to it and not really losing anything. I mean, they may lose Slow-Mo, but I think Terrence Shannon is going to come in and provide some dynamic play at that position if for some reason Slow-Mo doesn't return. I could argue that Terrence Shannon should be able to do some of those things that Slow-Mo did. And be even better defensively, more dynamic. And he's also, what, a 4-year guy who should be ready to contribute now. So that really works for the Minnesota Timberwolves, getting him at 27, I believe their pick was. So you just really like what the Minnesota Timberwolves did. I'm a fan of it. I like Dillingham there. I told you guys before the draft that I wasn't sure where Dillingham actually fit. But Minnesota is definitely a place where you look at Mike Conley and say, hey, he's probably going to be gone, or you could move on from him from any minute. Who was going to be his running mate, Anthony Edwards' running mate? A guy like Robert Dillingham, I think, is fantastic for the future in that role. And exciting, too. Very exciting player who can hold his own in offensive situations. And probably, you know, just basically just score like crazy and ignite the crowd. It's just it's definitely a new day in Minnesota, man. I figured they had turned the corner when they had Patrick Beverley and finally made the playoffs for the first time in a long time. But you get a player like Dillingham, you slap him next to Anthony Edwards and the upside of McDaniels from here, and you're talking about a team that's going to stick around. As to where it was, you know, you could see the end of them if they couldn't get that type of talent coming somewhere down the road. Now you can say, nah, they ain't going nowhere. Because even if they, as I've already said, replace those centers, you still got a dynamic trio there. So I don't think the Minnesota Timberwolves are a team that you would expect to fall off in the short term. And I think they can see ascending assets that can maybe net them a future if they have to retrade everything for some strange, odd reason. Maybe Anthony Edwards leaves in a couple years. McDaniels and Dillingham, if they develop properly, not only negate the idea that he would leave, but give them something to trade upon him doing so. That can get them some picks in the future if they develop right. So you love that situation for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think they really did a lot of good for their franchise, picking up those two players. Another team that I'm looking at is my very own Los Angeles Lakers, and it's low-hanging fruit for me to talk about the Lakers. We talk about them all day, but we just love the idea of them getting Dalton Knecht with the 17th overall pick, having him fall to us, fit our situation in many ways. And while I hear the conversations about the Lakers not having a big man or filling in the defensive wing position very well with this pick, I think at the end of the day it did provide us a shooter that we can have in multiple situations in the future. You know, if you're short-term minded, which a team in our situation often is, given the fact that our core is older, you can find yourself, you know, leaving a guy like Dalton on the board to try to fill a need with a rookie. But you got to weigh that with the possibility of that rookie not being able to fill that role even if they fit, because rookies tend to not be able to contribute. With a guy like Dalton at 23 years of age, the likelihood that he's going to be able to contribute is super high. And not only that, but when you consider what he brings to the table, he may be able to offset the idea of what you look like when certain things aren't put together properly. For example, last year, there was no Dalton Knecht scoring 20 points and stretching the floor. So the fact that you didn't have the ability to defend Jokic as well as you would like to, the fact that you didn't have defensive perimeter play that could really be dynamic, was more glaring in how the outcomes of basketball games went, because there was no player like Dalton creating so much space for Anthony Davis and LeBron James, hitting so many shots that I expect for him to hit. So in theory, if everything goes the way it's supposed to go, you're likely going to be more competitive in these basketball games, even in the event you're not able to improve your basketball club. If you got to bring back everything that you brought back that you had last year, you're a significantly better team because you got Dalton now a part of the fold. So how bad is it that you don't have some of those things that you didn't have last year versus this year with that player and all that he does best now a part of what you are? I think the Los Angeles Lakers probably win 6 or 7 more games last year if we have Dalton Connect on the team. I think we do. Because a lot of what was wrong with us was the fact that our defense was so glaringly bad in contributing to losses because our offense wasn't very good for portions at a time. A lot of that had to do with how Coach Ham used the roster as well. He negated some of our better options for options that he believed in that didn't yield any results. So when you remove him from the equation and all the stuff that he was prone to do with the roster, you insert a guy like JJ Redick, who's a shooting-minded player, so you imagine his coaching style is going to be more contributing to shooting for a guy like Dalton Connect. And then you add a Dalton Connect, of whom he's going to know how to put in certain positions unique to his experiences as a shooter. Now you find that that dynamic should make your team significantly more capable of winning some of the games you lost. I don't imagine we're going to have some of the roster rotational issues that we had with Darvin Ham, because JJ Redick, different person, dare I say better basketball mind, is going to put this unit in a different position than Darvin was able to. And so it's not, you're not going to see 5 forwards on the floor starting because of injury issues. In theory, hopefully we don't have any more. That should make it so that our rotation looks as cluelessly put together as it did when Darvin was running it. Because a lot of what affected the start of the season, which ultimately contributed to our overall record, were some of the things that Darvin was having a hard time improvising around. And so I don't anticipate those problems being in place this year, even if we bring everybody back. Now, I don't think we have a championship ceiling because there are certain things that we're going to need to do to defeat the best teams in the league that we have yet to do for our roster. But for me to think that this isn't a much improved team, if we don't do nothing else, is negating what I think that Dalton Connect can bring to the table. So I don't think, it's just like anything else. When you're really, really weak and then you bring yourself something very, very strong to help mitigate the weakness that you are, the openings are still the openings in regards to your weakness, but that strength needs to be accounted for in regards to assessing your overall strength. What you just added should make you an overall more capable basketball team. Now, if you lose D'Lo, that can offset some of that because he was a great deal of what you ultimately think can help you in certain areas. And if that's missing and you replace it with Dalton, it might bring you back to even. But if you're able to maintain D'Lo's asset and either keep him in the role that he's in or move him for something that's equivalent or better, or maybe even a little worse, you're still an improved basketball team. So, do we need to fill holes in the roster? Yes. Do I think it's as urgent that we do? Maybe not. Not if Dalton is going to be what it is that he's expected to be. Maybe not as urgent. Still not a champion, but more capable of having a much better regular season. So that's what I think of my Lakers. I think we really lucked out in getting a high-level guy like that at 17. He probably should have went in the top 10. And the fact that you get that type of value, you have to trade up to get that type of value. There was a chance, if things went the way we thought they would, that the Lakers move into the top 10 and the best player we had available would have been Dalton Connect. Like, seriously. You move up and you're happy to get him at 8. So it's like, you got to understand the value we just got right now. It's kind of how I feel about the Utah Jazz trading a bunch of stuff to get Dillingham, only to find Collier there at 27. Maybe you don't love Collier as much as you love Dillingham, but Collier would have filled the role that Dillingham ultimately is a fraction of the cost. If you would have known that he would have been there at 27, you wouldn't have had to mortgage some picks to get that point guard. Like, so I don't know if you see it that way, but a lot of people saw Collier and Dillingham in the same range. So it's just kind of strange how that ultimately panned out. They did, in fact, end up passing on Collier for Terrence Shannon, which I don't mind, since they filled in the role with Dillingham. They didn't want to overlap on point guards on a rookie contract, especially guys that are going to demand minutes. It doesn't make as much sense for them to do that. But you just never know. Sometimes you can trade up only to find that what you would have had available to you would have been the same stuff. And so that's kind of how that went for them. But as I said, I'm still happy with what Minnesota did. I think they're happy too. I do think I probably would have picked up Collier and traded him, since his value was worth so much at that point. 27, maybe you trade that. Maybe you still get Terrence Shannon and something else if you draft that player and then trade him. But, you know, it is what it is, man. So that's kind of what I think in regards to my Lakers. Just happy at the value we got at 17. I'm really a fan of what the Cleveland Cavaliers did. As I was telling you guys in reaction yesterday, it's not that they went all out of their way for anything. They got a player that was at value. But I just love the fact that they were able to get Jalen Tyson. I think he's a high-energy small forward, somebody that they could really use in their rotation. I think they're a team in need of a wing there. I like Max Strus, but I don't love Max Strus, especially at the cost they're paying. So that gives them a little more Max Strus experience. Max Strus insurance is the word I'm looking for. You could trade him if you want to. I still think that Imani Bates is a high-level forward that they could use as well, that they drafted last year. I think he's a very good player. I think he'll fit well next to Jalen Tyson in the future, especially if they move on from a lot of what they have right now that makes them a win-now team. You can see those two forwards being somebody that, if used correctly, can really make a difference. So that's something I like a lot. And, of course, it doesn't put any pressure on them to move on from Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell if for some reason those guys are on board with being Cleveland Cavaliers as this offseason progresses. I understand that it was likely they move one of those guys, but I think that them drafting a point guard would have made it seem as if they already had one foot out the door, when it might be still possible they retain both of them. So that makes it so that they have more leverage in trades as well, since they don't need to bring in a guard of any kind, or need rather to create a space for a guard. And so that might be a little bit of a reach in regards to the leverage, but I think it's there to see. And I don't think they did the same thing with their center position. They didn't necessarily bring in a center that would otherwise push Allen or Mobley into a space where their minutes are being taken from them. Somebody pushing them for the starting spot in any way. So I think that gives them more of a balance, because what they could use was a small forward, particularly a backup one. You know, George Niang paid him a lot of money last year. I don't think they were pleased with that at all. So it's just a lot of different things about getting Jalen Tyson, a high energy, you know, physical forward that I think just fits not only the needs on the court, but kind of balance them out for their books in regards to how they want to build and develop their team going forward. So that's a team I've accused of not being very deep. I think if they don't lose anything and add Jalen Tyson to their situation, they probably picked up their 5th best player or 6th best player. I really believe that, if he develops properly. So excited about that for them. Who else, man? I'm curious to see if the Houston Rockets don't turn around and start making a big trade from here. I do think they want to get an older player in place that's a superstar, Kevin Durant, somebody like that. And I think it's a decent chance that they take some of those young players they just picked up and move them. Maybe even Reed Sheppard. I think it's a decent chance that there still could be some trades involved in regards to some of those players that were picked yesterday rather. So that's something to pay attention to. I just don't think the Rockets are done moving around. I don't think Phoenix is done moving around. I really don't. What else, man? What else? There's so many good things that I saw last night. Yves Messi going to New Orleans, I think, is interesting, because they do have such elite shooters in Hawkins and Trigger Murphy and CJ McCollum, and they really did have a need for a center. and he really is a hell of an explosive, athletic center. So if he develops properly next to Zion Williamson, you see opportunities for lobs left and right and high-level highlights. So I think that could be an interesting look for their team. He is a good screen setter, so he can help create good screen out of timeout plays and stuff like that can open up those shooters. And so I think they're a shooting-centric team. I do believe they should probably try to find themselves a point guard. I'm not a big believer in Dyson Daniels. I don't think CJ McCollum is really fit for what they are. And so if I could pair both of those two guys up and get a point guard, I think that would be in my best interest if I'm the Pelicans. I'm just not a believer, man. I don't really like CJ McCollum's game. Y'all know that. He's more of a old school kind of, I'm going to take all the shots and not pass the ball to open guys, even though I'm being double teamed kind of guy. I'm just not really into that in 2024. That's not good basketball to me. And he tends to miss a lot of those shots. You love the fact that he has confidence and he believes in himself, but sometimes that really does work against the Pelicans when you know damn well he forces a shot at the buzzer, bricks it, and you got, you know, all these different guys that are more than capable of getting buckets for you. There are smarter ways to get a better shot off than he's going to allow you to have. And so I'm not a fan of CJ McCollum at all. I think he's a good guy. I like his podcast. I don't think he's a bad guy. He's a well-spoken, you know, he's a good guy. It's just his game. I don't like it. I really hate watching him play basketball for the Pelicans. I didn't feel that way when he was with Dame in Portland, but ever since he's been a Pelican, I've hated how he's operating and chosen shots and, you know, his shot diet. It's all bad, man. It's all bad, and I think they need more of a point guard, in my humble opinion. I would have liked to have seen Josh Giddey go there. If Josh Giddey was on the move, rather than end up in Chicago where they all have a bunch of other ball handlers and a Kobe White who I think is going to play fine off the ball, but probably better with the ball in his hands. I would have rathered a guy like Giddey who makes plays for others and gets others involved in a situation where he can dart the ball off to Hawkins and Trigger repeatedly. So, you know, I think if the Rockets want to make a trade for Brandon Ingram, I would definitely want to either bring in Reed Sheppard, who they just drafted. Although Reed Sheppard may be a little more like CJ, I don't know if that's the right thing to say. Although I think Reed is a little more connective. He's a little more unselfish. Maybe even a better shooter, honestly. But more like a Fred VanVleet, maybe. That might be a good place for Fred VanVleet. Although the salary matches might not necessarily work out, because at the end of the day, I think Fred VanVleet's probably making just as much as Brandon Ingram, and I don't look at that as an equivalent trade. Plus, if I'm New Orleans, I'm going to want some of those young players, not necessarily Fred VanVleet for Brandon Ingram. So I'm just saying they could use a point guard. And I understand that the Rockets may be having some interest in retaining a small forward of some sort. So that's just me running my brain around in circles. I'm not really sure if any of that's actually going to happen or be possible or whatever. But nevertheless, I think New Orleans could be a team that could potentially be making some moves. And I think Yves Messi, as long as they keep those shooters there, I don't think it hurts that they have Zion and Yves Messi next to one another. The more I think about it, I think it's actually a pretty good spot for Yves to be featured, since Jonas is likely out the door. So not bad. The Wizards, I think, are in a place where they can do a lot of different things, but there's urgency to do nothing. You bring in, most people think is the best player in this draft, and Sarr. You bring in Bob Carrington, who I think is a couple years away, but a really high-level big guard who's going to look to get his own shot and look to make plays for others at times. You bring in Keyshawn George, who I think is a polarizing player to a degree, because he has a lot of people that don't like his game, but I think ultimately a fantastic three-point shooter, someone who can stretch the floor. You still have Jordan Poole, who I think, in all things considered, has shown that he can play. Whether or not the maturity is going to catch up is a whole nother story. But in this environment where now you're bringing in Bub, now you're bringing in the defensive presence of Sarr, you got the Keyshawn George in place, I can kind of see an opportunity for him to feel a lot better about the role he's going to be in. You move Deni Avdija, of whom I liked a lot. You know, that's kind of a thing, but I think that you get the right value for him in the sense that you were able to get those picks in place, plus a 29 first-round pick as well, which should overall add to your asset class that you can either keep and draft or move for something else. So I think the Washington Wizards, I've said this for years, for like 2 years now that I think the Washington Wizards are one of the best teams to be able to draft with and kind of mold. If you're a new GM, you'd love that situation because they really are a blank canvas. And I think they got some nice talent last night. I think they helped themselves a lot. Malcolm Brogdon there can be a nice vet to help those guys. Or he could be a buyout candidate. I could totally see them buying him out. But I don't mind keeping him. Kind of help Bub Carrington along the way. And I don't think they push for more than 25 wins. But I think those could be some really good 25 wins, if that makes any sense. I could totally see a Washington Wizards team like that overachieving in certain basketball games. They'll beat the Celtics one night. They'll beat the Knicks one night. That kind of thing. I think the Washington Wizards are starting to put together something pretty decent. I don't know if Patrick Baldwin is still there. And I don't know how his development's going along. But I was mighty excited about Patrick Baldwin 3 years ago with the Golden State Warriors. I know he was a part of that trade that sent them Jordan Poole. I would still feel optimistic that I got a shooter there. Corey Kispert, somebody I like as well on that team, another shooter. So you can see where the shooting is starting to really come around. I'd imagine there'll be a high-volume three-point shooting team next year. And with Alex Arn in the paint, helping defend and ultimately being a fast-paced center, you feel kind of good about what this is molding to become. I like what Washington did. We're a long way away from them being a decent team, but I like what they did. I also like a lot of what I saw from the San Antonio Spurs. They did trade their pick that ultimately landed Dillingham to Minnesota. But they brought themselves Stephen Castle, and I think that's a great prospect for them to put him to have next to Wemby. He can come in and play that point guard position, kind of move Jones to the side a little bit, even though I think he's a nice player. They can get something for Jones if they really want to, but I don't know that he's a starter in this league, but a rather productive point guard. So the depth at the point guard position is starting to form. If they don't want Castle to play the point guard for whatever reason, you do have Jones in place who can play it, Trey Jones. You still got Keldon Johnson. You still got Devin Vassell. I like both of those pieces. I'm not in love with Johnson, but I think he's somebody that the San Antonio Spurs really appreciate. Can play some perimeter defense, get the three a little bit, definitely rebound the ball at the wing. So they got a lot of stuff about their situation in San Antonio that's starting to form to look really nice around Wemby. And Stephon Castle, with Wembanyama and Stephon Castle, you can see the makings of them being a very, very deadly defensive basketball team with offensive capabilities. Now, Stephon's shot is not really there, but he can be a connective piece, making plays for other people, getting to the line, stuff like that. His offensive contributions are understated based on the shot being a bit broken. But there's room for the improvement there, so you're not mad at them bringing him in, even though the shot is not there, because obviously Wemby can shoot, and as we said, Vassell, Keldon can shoot the ball as well. I would probably try to move Sochan, to be honest with you. I just think that there was a lot of footage last year that showed me that he's a nice piece, but maybe not for that situation. And he holds a lot of value. He's a good player, young forward, should be able to net you something very solid. So they could be big game hunting if they really want to. I know Trae Young is still somebody they may be interested in. I think he fits right next to Castle if they want to do something like that. Maybe they can target Brandon Ingram. I think that would be a nice place for B.I. To kind of do his thing next to Wemby with all that length. I think that would be fun. So the Spurs have all of the tools at this point to really start to play better basketball. I don't believe they're a contending team, but you can see where if they want to shift away from tanking, then they have some pieces in place that they can build with. Castle and Wemby is a real nice duo for the future. Really nice duo. And with Vassell on for a couple of years, and then the tradable assets that they have in other areas, I think the Spurs' future is as bright as they want it to be. I think they're in a great spot, and they still have a lot of picks from here. So I like that. We talked about New York. I think they're more so set on what they have over the next several years. I think they picked up some projects in Jones, Dylan Jones, and Bacom Dadier. I like those players. I just don't expect them to get many minutes in New York, because the New York Knicks have a coach that only runs their starters, and for the most part, those guys are in place on big contracts. So you don't really see room for them to really play those prospects, but I don't think those prospects will necessarily be ready either. Dillon may be, because I think he's an older guy, but Backholm is going to take some years, so I think it works out there. I would like to see them be in the market for a center, especially if they lose Hartenstein. And if they lose Hartenstein, it'll be in their best interest to try to find a way to get another center. Try to retain him if at all possible, but I think he's going to be a little expensive, to be honest with you. And they have given a lot of money away, as we know, with the $212 million 5-year deal that went to OG Anunoby, which I really, really hate that deal a lot. I just think they overvalued what he's going to be expected to do over the next 5 years. Like, he's not a $40 million a year guy to begin with, but he's definitely not someone you invest 5 years of basketball players. Absolutely not. His injury issues have told you you don't do that. So I just think that was a very, very bad contract. I didn't mind the Brooks Bridges trade. I didn't mind that. I thought they overpaid for Bridges, but I love the idea of bringing those Villanova guys together. But they lost me with the OG Anunoby signing. I thought that was awful. Like, arguably the worst signing I've seen in a while. Utterly terrible, really, if I'm being completely honest. But I think it'll help them on the court if he can stay healthy. I just have no interest in believing that he's going to stay healthy. You know, it's like Robert Williams at the small forward position. Like, why would you even invest in that? I don't know. But whatever the case may be, man, that's what I got to say about that particular thing. The Knicks look good on paper. I think they look good on the basketball court. But there are better ways to use $12 million, man. There are other ways to fulfill your two-way small forward position, and they wasted money on that particular player for sure. So that's a lack of vision, in my opinion. I'm not gonna lie to you. When you talk about what other things you can do with $212 million, when you need a two-way guard, you know how many two-way guards they could get for if they like, you know how many OG Anunobys you could actually get in this league? How many guys are gonna come into the league in coming years with those picks that you gave away that are going to be as good as OG Anunoby on a rookie deal? Like, that's just lacking vision, in my opinion. That really lacked vision. Lazy. That's what I would call that signing. Absolutely lazy. And you don't see a better way to... Anyway, whatever. So that's what it is. That's why the Knicks are never quite good enough, because they keep doing stuff like that, man. Throughout the course of my entire life, I've been watching the Knicks take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. And that was that. That was exactly what that was. That OG Anunoby contract is an anchor. And they don't know it yet, but they're going to find that out. And it's going to keep them from winning a championship, in my opinion. It really will. So we'll see if that ages well. I think it actually is going to. But, yeah, man, we'll see what they do with Robinson. For their sake, I hope someone overpays for him. Hopefully not my team, but it would be in their best interest to stop mortgaging any more picks. They were rich in picks, and they kind of threw them all away for Bridges. Again, lacked vision, but I understood it. There are other ways you can utilize all those assets. But people don't value assets. These organizations, I got 7 picks, I'm throwing them all in for my guy. Like, no, you don't. No, there's going to be another your guy. And he's going to be probably drafted with one of those picks. So, I don't know, man. I just look at the New York Knicks and I say, man, they lack vision. They lack vision. They're lazy-minded. And sometimes when you have a lot, you don't value a lot, so you give it all away for a little bit. And it's just a mistake. It really is. But, yeah, man. That's what I think of the Knicks. I think the Nets are in the opposite position. I love what they did. They did re-sign Claxton to a $100 million 4-year deal. I think secretly Claxton's actually probably worth that. When you consider what he does on the boards and defensively, he really is a fantastic young forward center combination. He's just been on a bad team, irrelevant team that no one's really paying attention to, because they didn't have any young talent or didn't look like they had any future. But in a nutshell, if he played for Boston Celtics or he played for LA Lakers, you would be talking about him as one of the best defensive players in the league, one of the better rebounding centers out there. So do I think he's worth $100 million? I actually do. I actually do, especially for a team like that who's rebuilding. He could be anywhere in the world, but he chose them type stuff. I think that's actually a good contract. And I don't see any reason why they don't feel good about it. They drafted him, so I like it. I think he's worth a little more than that if he's somewhere where people are actually paying attention to him. And I think they can turn themselves into that now with the picks and the assets that they picked up over the last 2 days. So I think the Nets are heading in the right direction if they stay on this path. I haven't forgotten about who they drafted last year, Clowney, Whitehead, even though he had the injury with the foot injury and stuff like that. I still know what type of lethal scorer he can become. And they're building him up, they're bringing him along slowly. I'm pretty sure he's going to step into their rotation this year if there's no other setbacks with the foot. So people will know of him soon. Clowney, Whitehead, Claxton, Cam Thomas is still going to be scoring 40 and 50 on certain nights. So I think the Nets, you know, they're heading in the right direction so long as they do good with what it is they just picked up. You know what I mean? They're heading in the right direction. But the Nets have a history of undoing things just like the Knicks do. So we'll keep an eye out on them. But so long as they stay on this path, I think they have a future, man. I think they have a future. It ain't bad. I think I'm actually kind of surprised when you see what the Denver Nuggets did. You see what the, you know, in picking up DaRon Holmes, one of the best front court players in this draft, in my opinion. You see what Minnesota did in bringing Dillingham to them and Shannon, ready-made rookies that are going to be really part of what their rotation will be going forward. I'm kind of surprised I didn't see Dallas make anything happen over the last day and a half. I'm not saying that Dallas really needed a whole lot because they were in the finals, but I expect from this point they may tweak something here or there. I really like their GM and the moves that he made at the end of the season, but if he's satisfied, I think he's going to find out that he's not going to be going back to the finals next year. Put it like that. If you don't react to what the West just did, you're not going to be in the finals next year. That's what I would tell him. So there's still time. You can see things happen in free agency. Maybe you can see them make trades from here, but I would have thought they'd try to get into this draft somehow. Looking at what these other Western Conference teams are doing, even looking at what my Lakers did, getting Dalton Connect at 17. There's going to have to be some reaction to that for other Western Conference playoff teams. You're going to have to react to that. And if you don't react to that, then you got to realize that the Western Conference just got significantly harder from what it already was. And so that's the team I'm looking at and saying, yo, for a team that just made the finals, you had better recognize that the NBA's Western Conference just got significantly harder to get to the finals again. Especially with Klingon now being in Portland, even though that's not a contender, they have the assets to get better. And y'all know how I feel about big men. They make it hard on you to win games against them. So a guy like Klingon could put an extra 10 wins on a Portland Trailblazer. That could be a couple extra losses toward the Dallas Mavericks. You see what I'm saying? I don't think Portland's a play-in tournament team, but I also don't think they're going to suck bottom out like they did this year. Not with an anchor like Klingon creating problems, and a guy like Scoot Henderson who's starting to play better. Shaedon Sharpe will be healthy this year, hopefully, knock on wood for his sake. Simons. Portland is a team I'm paying attention to in the sense that I think they can move on from some salary. The team costs way too much for the losses that they ultimately occurred. Now, and they have young talent, and they are essentially a rebuilding team. So I do expect Grant to potentially be moved, especially now that they've brought in Denny Advija. I do expect Ayton to be moved, especially since they've brought in Donovan Klingon. And maybe they can move on from Simons too, to be honest with you. I would knock on the door and see if I can make a trade to get Brandon Ingram if I'm Portland. I think he's a star level player who can slip in at their small forward position and be the star that's missing. So long as you remove Ayton and Simons to get him, maybe not Simons, but Ayton and Grant to get him. Now, both of those players would not be landing in New Orleans, but if you get another team involved, you can make it work, or another 2 or 3 teams involved, it might be possible. But I'm trying to take Grant and Ayton and turn them into Brandon Ingram, if at all possible. I just think Brandon Ingram better fits the timeline, even though him and Ayton actually probably same age. But I just don't like Ayton like that for their situation, especially now that Klingon's in place. I don't even need to go down the path of asking either one of them to come off the bench. They're both starting centers, and I don't know if you're going to easily find a place for Ayton, but if I can canvas the league and find a place for Ayton, if I'm Portland, I'm going to do that. Get him off the team and find yourself with that talent, that level of cap going into different talent. That's just what I think I would do, man. Shaedon, the Scoop, Denny, Clingan, it's a nice core of rookie contracts. I don't know that I need the salary of some of those other guys that have already been paid. They're not going to make me good enough to make any of that make any sense. And they probably make me too good to get the first overall pick. So it's time to start shaving salary if you're Portland. That's what it's time to do. And I think they'll try. I think they'll try. If it's a deal to make, they'll make it now. If not, I'm pretty sure they'll try to do something at the deadline. If not, then they'll be continuing to try to do it in the offseason next year. But they do need to shave salary drastically. Rather drastically, in my opinion. Or reallocate it to things that are good enough to make it so that all that salary makes them good enough to win. I just don't know how you capture that with those values being so inflated as they are. Ayton nor Grant are worth what they're getting paid. So it's kind of hard to get what you need there. So yeah, there's just a few things on my mind, man. A few things on my mind. At the end of the day, I do wonder about some of these fits for some of these players that went certain places. I'm still scratching my head about the Ware pickup for the Miami Heat. I don't love that pick for them. I understand that a lot of their fans are happy because they got a center with some length, but this is the Miami Heat. We're talking about culture. This is a guy who has bad motor issues, like very bad motor issues. Like there's so much footage of him being lazy on rebounds, so much footage of him ball watching and stuff like that. I just don't know how he's going to fit in that culture. They're going to have to get something out of him that I don't think a lot of people who have followed him closely really see. And so that's the concern with Ware. And then on the same day that you sign Bam Adebayo to a big deal, you draft somebody who plays the same position. Dalton Connect's right there. McCain is right there. I don't really get it. I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't get it. I think there are other ways to get a center than getting a guy that just probably doesn't fit what you are as a team. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he turns into some version of Derek Lively like everyone hopes he does. But I don't really think that's what Miami really needed. I don't think that's what they needed. I think that they got a little scared of the idea that Dalton Connect was going to be more like Duncan Robinson, and they feel they already have that piece. But I think that's overcorrection, to be honest with you. I really think that's an overcorrection. And the more spacing you have in this era of basketball, the better you probably are doing. So I don't know, man. I think they overthought it, and I think they may regret it because I don't see any indication of Khalil Ware actually being what he's supposed to be. I don't see it, man. I think they might have picked up a guy who may be okay, but I don't think so, man. I don't know. We'll see. We will see. What else stands out to me? I don't know what the Bucks actually had in mind when they took A.J. Johnson, somebody who probably could have been gotten in the second round. I saw footage of them in their war room as they were making the call. They were saying they were going for a big swing, but you're actually reaching. I do think that A.J. Johnson is going to bring back first-round value, but I sort of looked at him like I look at Max Christie for the Lakers last year when they first drafted him. If he would have stayed in school a little longer, he could develop a little better. Eventually, he's going to become what you want him to become so long as you develop him properly. But do I accuse the Milwaukee Bucks of being a good development team? With the exception of what they did with Giannis, which was amazing, the answer is no, I don't. They're not a good development team. And most importantly, they're a team that wants to win right now. So why would you bring in a guy that's 2 years away from being 2 years away, and even furthermore, reach down to get him? Especially when you've mortgaged so many picks already. You don't have a lot of assets. So why are you gambling with a reach down project with a win now timeline? It's just a bad pick. A.J. Johnson's a good player, but getting drafted at the late first round this year was a bad pick. Now, does this have to age well? No, it doesn't, because he could really turn out. I think he's a good player. I like him. I like him for a lot of situations. But when you talk about capturing value, they didn't capture value, in my opinion. They left first-round value on the board. Filipowski's right there. You know what I'm saying? Several guys were still on the board that I think I think they had like the 23rd pick. Baylor Shireman was still on the board. Like, I just think that you probably capture value a bit better if you take somebody in the range that you are in and then trade down for the second round prospect that you're ultimately excited about. So I just think that was lacking vision as well. And it's typical for them, but the problem is they're in Milwaukee. They got to keep Giannis happy. And because they're in Milwaukee, you can't expect that another superstar is going to want to run behind Giannis if he leaves. So you can't afford to do what they did. And so I just hated the pick for them. Like the player, but he's going to have to really, really play well early. And I don't see any path to that because guess who the coach is? Doc Rivers, who doesn't play rookies. So it's bad all the way around. I just think it's a bad use of your assets, to be honest with you. But we'll see what Milwaukee does going forward. I still think they need to find a center. I think Brook Lopez may be shopped, but he's, what, 37 years of age? It's going to be kind of hard to get anybody for him that can fill that spot, especially since centers are at a premium. It might be in their best interest to just hold on to him a little bit. They could use a defensive wing, maybe somebody who could play next to Dame Lillard that can actually defend somebody. But if I'm them, I'm moving Dame Lillard, to be honest with you. Even if I can only get back picks for him and not the greatest talent, I'm going to try to reset around the margins. You're not fully resetting, but I don't think that Dame and Giannis really work. The regular season is fine. Come playoff time, nah, you don't want that at all. I think they should be in the market for a guy like Bruce Brown. I said they should need to trade for somebody like that. That's kind of along the lines of the type of piece they need. Empower Andre Jackson a bit more. Empower Marshawn Beauchamp a bit more. Or trade them for players that they don't mind empowering a bit more because they really need the talent. Which is why a guy like A.J. Johnson, who is not ready, should not be the pick. But I think Milwaukee's a mess. I think their front office looks like they don't know what they're doing. And I think it's very bad for them because they still got to keep Giannis happy. So I don't know. We keep an eye open for them, see if they're going to actually re-sign Giannis's brother. I know he's a free agent. He just busted up his knee. But with Giannis, you may still need to re-sign him in order to keep him happy. So that looked like a nightmare to me. That looks like a complete nightmare. And we can thank the Milwaukee Bucks for why the Boston Celtics won the championship, because of their ambition to get Dame Lillard and ultimately trading away Drew Holiday to Portland, who then turned around and traded him away to the Boston Celtics for pennies on the dollar. So, you know, Milwaukee's just, their front office probably needs to be replaced, to be honest with you. They should probably move on from some of them dudes up there. We'll see if the A.J. Johnson thing can yield the results that they hope for, but on draft night, that's bad value, man. So it's a lot of stuff to consider, man. Still more things to talk about, but I'm pretty much where I need to be. So I'll end the video here. I appreciate everybody for watching BDF 44, and I'm out.